Well, hello, folks. I'm here with a guest that I've known for a long time, Usman Humayun. Usman's background is one of those big Ivy League schools. We won't embarrass him by telling everybody he went to Yale. Um, he's I know him as kind of a data scientist, intellect, big thinker, marketing strategist, and we worked together many years ago. We did battle at Sears for quite a long time, and I still remember the first time I saw you, Usman. I walked into a conference room, and you were sitting at the end of that conference table where you always used to sit, beating on a keyboard and asking a lot of questions that nobody wanted to know, what nobody wanted the answers to, like, where's all the money going to come from, and uh, and uh, getting uncomfortable answers. But it's a real pleasure to have you on, and we want to talk a little bit about your journey, talk a little bit about what's going on in the world of data and digital marketing and artificial intelligence. I was this past week, I had the privilege of being with Rita McGrath again, and I'm teaching in her leading strategic growth and change program at Columbia. And as you know, I do this presentation on transformation and leadership. I got 3 slides in, and we started to talk about what was happening in AI and job creation. And that was the rest of the morning. So we took the entire day to do my 3-hour presentation, but it was all about the anxiety around where's the world going. So welcome. I'm looking forward to this conversation. What are you up to lately? What's going on in your world?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. And, very privileged to have known you for so many years and worked with you, learned from you. Really excited to be here. This is my first podcast. So,
Okay, really? Well, this
I'm
is my
excited to,
second. So we're
I'm excited to dip my toes into this and see where this leads.
yeah.
And I don't think I could have asked for a better partner in that. So appreciate that.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
glad to
So
be here.
Yeah, so I've been, yeah, on this interesting journey. I get this question asked a lot of time. How did I go from doing math at Yale when I was in college to marketing? So it's been a fun journey for me. Starting at right after graduation, working at Sears, mostly in data and analytics, but helping marketers and CMOs. As you recall, how Sears was in terms of their structure, where they had all these business units that operated as separate companies. So I had
Yeah,
the privilege of working with a lot of C-suite leaders, with businesses that was in billions of dollars. So learned a lot, got enamored with marketing, and really got into more around data analytics uh, in service of marketing, which
right.
resulted eventually for me to become part of more formally get into marketing, especially with my last job at Albertsons. So, in terms of what you asked, what I've been up to for about 6 years, I was at Albertsons running all of their digital marketing across, organic, owned, CRM, paid media, and then also leading marketing, product, technology, operation, and analytics for them. And then since Q3 of last year, I left Albertsons, and I've been since then on a health journey, a learning journey, and what I would say is, an exploratory journey to connect with people I haven't talked to for a while, and figuring out what I want to do next. So I am talking to people, I'm writing, I am vibe coding a little bit here and there, and just reading about AI. And part of me feels very excited about the advancements happening in AI, and part of me feels impatient because I'm on the sidelines right now,
Yeah.
and not necessarily utilizing it as formally as I want to. So that's where I've been.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think I love the journey from Yale through Eddie Lampert's world, which I spent some time with you in. And
Yep.
talk to me about, so I love this, from math to marketing kind of thing. And when I was at
Yeah.
Columbia Business School, we had Noel Capon was our marketing professor, and he used to say that, marketing is all about math and data. Of course, it was arithmetic back then, right? If you spent $1 and you got $2, life was
Yep.
good. Um, Talk to me a little bit about that journey. When you got there, what did it look like? And by the way, I know Sears has ended kind of tragically, but they were really on the forefront of
They
a
were.
lot
Mhm.
kind of digital analytics and digital marketing. The failures at Sears didn't happen there; they happened somewhere else. The failure to invest in stores
Mhm.
and in product, I think, was the biggest issue. But we won't go down that rat hole today. Talk to me about that journey a little bit. What did that look like for you, kind of kid coming out of school and showing up working for Eddie owned it when you went there, right? I mean, was it
Yes,
what?
yes. I think that was a draw. So, when I graduated, it was smack in the middle of the recession, 2008. My dream was to go into investment banking or management consulting. As every foreign kid who was on the East Coast, especially because those were the jobs you usually got over there.
Yeah.
Um, but the draw of working with Eddie Lampert and doing something new there was very interesting. It was very undefined at that time. They basically said, "Hey, there's a potential to work on very transformative, accelerated leadership initiatives, um, and you get to work with Eddie Lampert." And as you remember, especially during that time, the hype around Eddie Lampert. I mean, he's a very successful, smart guy still, but at that time was probably peak of his, prowess in terms of the media was calling him the future of Warren Buffett. So the next Warren Buffett. So coming out of college and having that opportunity was just pretty irresistible. So I ended up there. I started in this central customer analytics group that was filled with these leaders from McKinsey, all former McKinsey partners. Corey Ulinsky was the leader, and then there was Kurt Kendall and Jason LaRose and a few others. Most consulting background. A very new group that was set up, and I was part of the marketing analytics group, and I was literally employee number 2 in that team for marketing analytics. So between me and this other guy, we built the first marketing measurement framework, leveraging marketing mix models to start to measure marketing performance across different channels, traditional and digital, for Sears. So that was the starting point. Sears had 30, 35 business units. Every business had a CMO. So we had to aggregate all of that data, produce measurement, and then go talk to 30, 35 internal clients and explain to them what was working for them and what was not working for them. So that was, a couple of years of my life. In the middle, after that, in the middle, I got a chance to work with Scott Friedheim, who was first chief operating officer and later the president of Kenmore, Craftsman, and DieHard, the private label brands for Sears, as his chief of staff. So that got me into more business strategy and other things. But my heart kind of always, was with analytics. So I ended up coming back and actually in a more senior position, working and leading the marketing analytics function in 2012. And then kind of just grew from there. Um, was working directly with Imran Juma back in the day when he was the CMO at Sears. And that really got me into, pure marketing. And it was a good coincidence because one, Sears was in the middle of this transformation where
Yep.
they were going from traditional to targeted and digital marketing, which is, as you know, heavily reliant on data and technology. So not necessarily on, more of the traditional pieces around creative and more intuitive type of things. And then the other side of it was also just having to get to work at that C-suite level gave me a bigger, broader picture, and I could help influence a lot of the marketing direction over there. So once Imran left, they actually never really formally hired a CMO, and I continued to help Eddie directly. So 2015 onwards, I was working directly with Eddie, which was a very transformative and learning experience. Very intense, but a lot of fun in terms of what I got to learn and what I got to do. So that's how I kind of started pivoting more towards marketing,
Yeah.
and just analytics was always my bread and butter, and I still think about it that way. But because I'm always like I'm focused on business outcomes, so marketing became something that was more interesting because it was an outcome based activity for me, and something that I could own rather than say I built a model, I built a dashboard. More like, hey, we use that to actually deliver something, and here's the incremental results for that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was one of those guys that kept saying, "Prove it to me." I don't know if you remember that. So, talk to me about that transition, right? So, my recollection. So, in the early days of Google, right? So the magic. I used to have guys like you come to me and say, "Hey, if you give me $1, I'll give you $2 back."
Yep.
Right? And they'd all come back with this crazy math where like, oh, you spend $1 on Google and we did $2.22 in gross margin. So look how much money you made. My argument was always, well, wait a minute, whatever company that you may be with, whether it was Best Buy or Sears or Sony, it's like, well, but people knew we had a store there before you ran the ad on Google.
Mhm.
So how do we account for that? Where I gave you $1 and now you think I made $1.22 in profit? Um, how did how did that evolve for you, and how has that evolved in the terms of you went from a digital guy to a marketing guy. I still think you're a digital guy, but
I
um,
do too.
yeah. And so how does that how's that evolved from the time you were that eager kid that wanted to dive into the Sears Holdings swimming pool to today? Can you prove it? Yeah, I will tell you straight out. I didn't think you could prove it to me. When we were working together. Can you prove it to me now? And how's that changed?
I think I may have lost some audio.
No, yeah, it
Okay.
may have a little bit of a lag in the upload, but
Okay.
you'll be
Okay.
good.
No problem. All right. Just wanted to make sure.
No,
Yeah,
you're
I
good.
think with the data that's available and the modeling techniques and the technology that's available, it's definitely evolving and getting into a much better place with a higher confidence. I would say that the gold standard of measurement has always been the same, which is the test versus control methodology. The issue with that has always been, how do you test on a regular basis, or how do you test at a scalable level all the time? So that's the limitation with the measurement. So if in an ideal world, if you ever have to prove anything, you look at pharma as a great example when they're introducing new products, and they do these tests to prove efficacy, and it's always a blind test versus a control group matched audiences across a lot of different relevant dimensions. The same thing applies for retail measurement. If you want to do marketing measurement and understand the incrementality of any campaign or any spend or activity that you're doing, you test one or two ways. You either do more in one place and the same on the side of control, or you go dark and you keep running in one place. So you basically are changing one variable and keeping the other same, and you're doing a test versus control analysis.
Mhm.
Um, Back in the day, the only other methodology that was close to measuring that incrementality was called marketing mix modeling, which was,
Yeah.
and it still is, pretty normal in terms of what people use. It's a regression-based methodology, but it's a mathematical model. It's an estimate, and what
Mhm.
it's doing is it's basically uh, you know measuring the relationship between your activity and your dependent variables. Dependent variable typically for a retail would be sales. Sales themselves are not independent; they are an outcome of a bunch of different things. Um, so, what are your different activities, and how do they impact change to your outcome, which is sales? In this case, was how the multivariate linear regression model was built. And you're right. In terms of marketing, does not drive 100% incrementality. Marketing does not drive all the outcomes. There's a lot of other things. Your brand, existing brand equity, your store, the fact that you have products in there, the fact that you have decent prices in there, your associates are nice or not nice, in stock, out stock, all of those things, your promotions, all of those things play a role. And other outside impact, your competitors increasing, lowering prices, opening, closing stores, all of that plays a role in that outcome of how many sales you get. The beauty of both test versus control and marketing mix modeling is that one, more of a more accurate. The other one, from a mathematical model perspective, is trying to tease out the effects of things that are not changing and things that are changing. So variables that are changing and variables that are not changing. So that's been what's been used for the most part of the years that I've been focused on this. There was a third one that since you mentioned the early days of Google, that people used a lot. The term that's analytics people don't like, attribution. Back in the day, in the aughts, it was mostly last touch attribution,
Yeah.
which did not actually account for incrementality. So that you're absolutely right over there, that somebody will come and say, hey, I ran this branded paid search on Google and the answer was $100 in return on ad spend. And you're like, well, that makes no sense, because at your level, at a C-suite, you're like, if I can get $100 for every dollar I'm spending, I'm going to shut off everything and I'll give you all the money, because $100 return is just like out of this world.
I used to tell people that you had infinite money. If you could prove that to me, there's no limit the amount of money I give you, but nobody can
and
ever prove
that was the argument we used to have too, because apart from you asking me to prove it, you also said, hey, if it works, then you can have as much money as you want. And back in towards the end of your Sears time, I was on the finance side where I was also controlling the budget, and I'm like, but we don't have the budget. It's not unlimited.
But it would be if you could. It would actually be unlimited.
You're right. Yeah.
So how's
But
the world? How's that changing? How's the world changing in marketing with AI and ultra big data and kind of these mega data pools they have now?
Yeah. I think two things that are very interesting that have happened across both test and learn and marketing mix modeling, and attribution has evolved as well. So with AI, and being able to crunch a lot more data than you could before, you could actually run a lot more rapid tests now, and you could do multivariate testing instead of just A/B testing. You can also analyze the output a lot more. So that's one thing. So the testing, back in the day, you would have tests that will run for a quarter. Now you can do tests much faster. And you've moved from, most of the retailers were doing store level testing. Now you can do customer level testing. And if you know anything about, testing and statistics, what happens is that if you have a bigger sample size, you can run a smaller test from a time frame perspective and still get a significant, statistically significant result. With stores, you're never going to have millions of stores, but with customers, you get millions of data points. So it's a much shorter test you can run and get high confidence results. So that's one thing. And then AI is helping crunching and analyzing the output and giving you the insights that you can use for the next test or the scaling of things. The other thing that had happened is marketing mix modeling and attribution are coming together. So for a while, there was last touch attribution. Some people use first touch attribution. None of that accounted for incrementality. Then came multi-touch attribution, which accounted for some organic, but it was still missing incrementality. It was, I would say, about 30% there because organic is free. So the paid pieces were taking less credit now, but they were still not accounting for non-marketing components. The latest approach is what's now being called unified attribution, or commercial attribution, which starts to bring in marketing mix and multi-touch attribution together. And what's happening is that, again, with the big data technology that's available in AI, instead of running, back in the day, marketing mix models were run at best on a quarterly basis. Now you're able to run a rapid marketing mix model daily or weekly which is looking at the commercial effects, non-marketing effects, and then you can bring in your multi-touch attribution
Uh-huh.
into the marketing mix, that rapid model as another input to really start to get causal effects using regression-based modeling to understand the incrementality of your marketing activity. It's still more focused on digital than it is on traditional, but it's more so because the traditional stuff, both in terms of how you develop those campaigns, whether it's TV, circular radio, or the output you get back in terms of results, all of those are so slow that, if you ran a daily or a weekly model, it's not going to really change much for the traditional side of things because you're just not getting the data or you are unable to make those changes that rapidly. But when you think
Yeah.
about email, when you think about text, when you think about, any paid media, social, that's where you can make changes, almost real time. So that's
Yeah.
where this methodology is really helping. And it's focused on, incrementality.
So I work with a ad agency in Detroit on and off. And we all watch kind of the media trends. And one of the things that I'm hearing a lot, or you look at what's going on with the NFL, like NFL football has been, I forget the numbers. You may know these numbers, but something like, 92 or 93 of the top rated TV programs last year were football games, right? So a whole bunch of things have happened in the world. So nobody's watching network TV anymore. If it's not live, like my wife is big on The Voice, and you can see why, because, you have these live events, and if you miss them, you miss
Yep.
them, right?
Yep.
But what's working on TV is, kind of a little bit of the morning shows, which are live.
Mhm.
Nobody watches evening news anymore. I think only crazy people watch CNN and Fox anymore, right? Like I can watch either one of them for about 2 minutes.
Yeah.
I can't stand this anymore.
Yeah. Too
And
extreme.
yeah, and it's too extreme, right? Everything's too extreme. And then you have
Mm.
football. So I think about that, and I also think about what's happened to retail. And you were at, I guess, the beginning of the end of a lot of retail, right? And I was in there trying to save some of these companies as well. And for a lot of reasons, some of them became unsavable. But um, what does this all mean, right? So you this if the highest and greatest return on advertising that I've seen in the last 5 or 6 years has been TV advertising, which is kind of interesting. It's been football, mostly football, sports, morning drive for you remember the days that Art Van, may they rest in peace, where the only thing that worked really was morning drive, right?
Or the evening drive.
Or the evening drive, and football, and sports.
Hmm. Hmm.
Where's the world going in terms of media and marketing and data, and how, how do I
Yeah.
and then I'm going to ask you what the future of retail is, and then I'll watch your head explode.
And I think when I think about the TV piece, it's very interesting. And my thinking has evolved on this. Back in the day, I think if you asked me in 2010, I would be like, TV is dead. Like TV is going to die. Um, and you're
Well,
right. Part of
you were
TV,
one of those digital guys trying to convince me to buy a
yeah,
keyword.
yeah. And I think part of TV is dead. But you're right. Like from a TV show perspective, all of my consumption is through streaming platforms now.
Right.
So you don't buy cable TV for watching a network TV show or any type of TV show. But I think what TV has figured out is a couple of things. One is that the reason why, whether it was TV or circular or even radio, the reason why they were effective was not because they were effective in terms of like having an impact or incrementality. It was because the cost of distribution was really low.
Yeah.
It was a very easy way and a very cost effective way to reach millions of people very quickly. And once you put that, because when you think about the ROI, there is the revenue or profit in the numerator, and then you have the cost in the denominator. So if you keep on making sure that the cost per unit, cost per reach, or whichever denomination you want to go by is very, very effective, that's where people will always be attracted. So that's one. So between the reach and the cost effectiveness, TV has never really lost its value. In fact, it has increased. And how is that increased? That's the other side of things. So what they've done is, if you remember the Art Van days, we never did national TV. At Sears, we always did national TV. At Artman, we never did national TV. We always did local TV. And local TV started to bring in relevance and as well as, again, cost effectiveness, because you don't have to go waste your money on a larger audience than the one that are in your localities that you wanted to target. And it started bringing in relevance more and more. So now you are not really thinking about, hey, this is the 50% that I don't know which 50% of my marketing is working or not. Because, I'm targeting zip codes where I have stores. I'm targeting zip codes where I have my target customers, or where I'm opening stores or where my competitors are, and I'm going after that. So I think that's where it started getting interesting. And then as we continue to evolve, and they have given access to more data. So at Artman, at Albertsons, I was having a lot of conversation with Comcast, and their counterparts who've built these giant analytics arms, data arms, where they would come to retailers and say, hey, let's partner together where we can give you clean room, data and analytics support where, privacy enabled, very sophisticated, but at the same time, you can do better measurement, you can do better understanding. And we could also give you more audience specific. So instead of, the good old days of buying demographics like, women 18 to 35, now you can get into a lot more sophistication in both demographics, psychographics, really getting down to which shows your target audience may be, watching. So let's go. What is your target audience? What are your customer attributes? Match them to our customer attributes. Come up with very, very custom audiences that we can activate against. And, across streaming, across the local set TV boxes, that has become something very powerful, which done right, can drive, a lot of, productive TV spend.
So what's the real tactical question? Tell me about the best ad campaign you ever ran in terms of ROI and why did it work? Okay, or wait, let me ask this differently. Did you ever run a good one? I mean, let's just start there. Why don't we start there? This is
I
what our
love the
meeting used to be like, by the way. If you ever had a good idea, let's
had
start
a good
there.
idea. I love the confidence there. I think at Albertsons, which by the way, was a good eye opener for me. So I'll backtrack a little bit. At Sears and
Sure.
Art Van, the focus was always on performance, not as much on brand. When you think about Sears, the focus was never really on driving brand as much, apart from Kenmore
No.
and Craftsman, right? On Artvan, I think the brand equity was pretty strong because it was a regional player and it was, number one player in its market. So the focus was almost always on like promotions and performance marketing. At Albertsons, we launched, I think it was 2022, we launched this campaign for a brand campaign. And it was a very interesting thing because Albertsons did not do TV at a national scale. They never did TV at the scale that they could have given the size of the company. They were, they had some local TV here and there, but nothing at a national scale. So we were going to launch this new brand positioning. It was called Sincerely Albertsons. And this was going to be a major campaign. The agency came and pitched, a full 360 activation, including TV. And we said, we don't want to spend money on TV. So this is going to be mostly a digital activation with some broadcast elements, but very small. And, so we launched the campaign. It was a 360 campaign from a digital perspective, including, elements of the creative and content we brought into our email, push and text, on our app and web, and how we showed up in store through signage and all that. So, a pretty massive campaign, and a brand campaign. And you know me better than most other people on, my analytics background, my performance focused background. So I was one of the few ones that like, this is going to be interesting because, this is brand. Brand takes time,
Yeah.
in general to give you a return. Second, this is grocery retail where it's a very short-term focus on, return and profitability. So will we have patience to actually wait till the return comes in? And then the third side of it is, how much does brand really matter in grocery to begin with? Um, right? Because, you're selling the same thing that everybody else is selling. And some of your
Right.
competitive advantages are more around location and price and your product assortment and all that. Um, but it was very interesting. We launched it. We launched it across, a spectrum of channels. And the thing that I'm most proud of that we did was we made sure that we were measuring everything, every activation we were running. And we started, seeing what I expected, which was around like a slow burn, um, in terms of results that were positive but not profitable. And it was my job to go in front of the leadership and kind of explain to them like, hey, it's okay. We're measuring it. It's not yet showing profitability, but we need to give it time. And then there was part of me that had to also, or part of my work that had to also push back to say, hey, I am willing to stake my credibility on this, that I am going to continue to push for
Right.
investment here while we may be taking a short-term hit because we could have gone after some lower funnel stuff and drove some immediate returns. But in 6 weeks to 8 weeks time frame, we started seeing the campaign start to flip and start to go in the territory of a $7-8 return, which was our threshold for profitability. And then it continued to go from there. I think we ran the campaign for about 6 months, and the end result was like a $12 return on ad spend, from an incremental revenue perspective, which was great to see. That was a real eye opener for me also, just being on the performance side of things for most of my life, or targeted side of things. This had some elements that were more mass, and because, you were trying to reach more people, and there were, you wanted to acquire some new customers and you want to acquire some churned customers for which you want to go broader than your usual targeting. Um,
Right.
which is what, when I talk to people now, I'm like, there's three elements of marketing that makes it successful: brand and storytelling, data and analytics, and then technology. Those three, which, back in the day, if you asked me, when we first started working together, I may have been like, yeah, do the 2 and 3, and the one, it's icing on the cake. So that was
Yeah.
good learning.
Yeah. That's it. But $12 was pretty spectacular, I guess.
Yeah.
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 So we've we've both experienced kind of the good and the bad of retail. With everything going on with digital and the continued explosion of online retail. Um I was in the mall in Paramus the other day. Not Paramus, yeah, in Paramus. And pretty amazing mall. It's got a Nordstrom on one corner and an Apple store in the middle of it. But as you're walking the mall now, you're seeing all these pop-up stores that are clearly up
Yeah.
there, doing a rev share. Where's retail going? 5
Yeah, I
years
think
from now, 5 years from now, what's it gonna look like? And I
uh,
you've been in 2 sides of it, right? You've been in department stores, with
yep,
Sears and, grocery, which is, consumables and,
yep.
everybody's gotta eat almost every day. What's gonna happen?
I think there is, obviously this future is evolving very fast. I think there's a few things that are happening, and some will stay the way they are, but a lot of it is evolving. So I think, um, I'm a big proponent of stores, but in terms of thinking about, stores with the right experience. So you gave a good example, two examples of Nordstrom and Apple. Both of those stores, when you go in there, there's a certain experience that cannot be replicated online. Um, that is a physical experience. You go in there. There is a consultative portion to it. There is a touch and feel portion to it. There's an inspirational portion to it that digital has not yet figured out. Though there is some elements of I feel augmented AR coming in, which will help with that. But at the same time, I think that's really like having that right elevated store experience is very helpful. When we were at Artwin, we used to talk about this that stores as showrooms, stores as not necessarily somewhere where you're doing an immediate sale, but it's something you're showcasing your products and services, and it's almost an experience. I think that's the piece that will continue to become more important for most stores, if they want to be successful. I strongly believe that would be, one thing and one reason why you go to a store. If it's all about just buying something, even in grocery, if you just want to buy something, you can buy it online. If I know what I want, I don't have to go anywhere. I just go online and buy it.
Right.
But if I want to discover, some of that, still happens in stores. Now, there is the other side of it is that a lot of the discovery is now moving to AI. So that's an interesting one that, that's the second thing that's evolving. Um, and one of the things that I have found very interesting there is that you remember like when I believe Reddit built like these monetization partnerships with both Gemini as well as OpenAI. And you could the AI was Gen AI chatbots were able to kind of like query Reddit and get opinions and reviews and stuff. What has happened for me as a customer is that I'm doing a lot of my discovery on these chatbots, but I've also started looking or using Reddit a lot more than I ever did. Why is that? It's because
Yeah. Why is that?
when it is because when I'm looking at a chatbot and I'm like, hey, the source of truth for the chatbot is Reddit, then why don't I just go directly on Reddit, right? So it's like I talk to Ron and Ron talks to, I'll make it up, Rita. And everything he tells me is coming from Rita. So I can just go directly talk to Rita.
Hey, that's
Has
just
been
a
an
rumor that she doesn't have all the great ideas. I had a good idea one.
Oh, wait. So Reddit is like, hey, if that's the source of truth for a lot of things, I mean, I have direct access to Reddit, so that's become an interesting thing for me. So I think discovery is definitely a lot more on social and AI than it ever used to be. So I don't go to the store to discover anymore. I go to the store where I am, not completely sure, but I have some semblance of what I want, and I want to try things, or I want to complete things around it. Like, hey, I've decided I want to buy one of five things, whether it's an electronic thing or something. Like after a very long time, I bought a laptop at a Best Buy. I had been buying them online. But this time I'm like, I kind of know what I want, but I want to pick it up and I want to weigh it to see how light it is. I want to see what the screen actually looks like when I want to type and see how the keyboard feels, right? So those are the things where, and that's why I actually now enjoy again going to a Best Buy because of the experience that they give you and the consultative aspect where they're not like just trying to sell me stuff. They're just like telling me about the products that are there and the virtues of it. And then I can choose to buy it or not, or I just experience it really, like I'm an electronics guy, so just experience that and kind of come back.
Yeah. So I think,
But I think that
yeah, you're touching on, my theory of retail has always been all about experience, right?
yeah
And you know, Costco is an experience, right? Nordstrom is
yeah.
an experience, and they're completely different experiences. But the reason I'm going there, I think I just lost you, Usman.
I'm here.
Okay, I lost your video for some reason.
Can you see me?
Yeah, you're back. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in any case, so you talked a little bit about AI, and I've been following you on Substack. And you've written about that AI's, as I'll paraphrase, it's not just about faster content creation. It's about rethinking the whole marketing system. One of the things I
Hmm.
think about with AI, because I've been playing a lot with AI, and remind me to come back to the beginning of this topic if I forget. But um, AI has, when I'm talking to Claude's always very complimentary of me, right? He's like, "Oh, that's a great question, Ron," and what a brilliant insight. And um, so I spend more and more time with Claude. But if Claude told me, and actually Claude did do this, right? So I'm building my own AI system, um, and so I've been watching all this stuff, and I've been playing with these AI systems for a while now. And last summer, I decided to really dedicate some time to kind of investigating how does GPT work and how does Claude work, and actually spent a huge amount of time on ChatGPT writing prompts and trying to understand how the stuff works. And as you well know, from last summer to yesterday, the AI
Yep.
world has changed radically. I mean, it's just been unbelievable. Um, but it just strikes me that if Claude was to tell me to buy something, and it did, it told me if you're building your AI system, you should buy a Mac Mini, and this is how it should be configured. I told it all the criteria
Yeah.
I want. I want to be able to have secure systems that I can actually put customer data in. I don't have to worry about, and it's not out in the web. And to the extent that I need inference, it's anonymized. What Claude told me to buy was almost $10,000 worth of stuff, and I bought it.
Yeah.
Now it's going to take 9 weeks for Apple to actually ship it to me. They're doing quite well these days in the hardware business. But um, how do you think about that when it comes to marketing? I mean, the ethics of AI, and you know, uh, there's all these lawsuits now where people say that ChatGPT convinced my child to harm themselves, or God forbid,
Hmm.
kill themselves.
Hmm.
How do you think about that?
Yeah, I think, my simplest opinion of all these chatbots is that, they're a very confident friend, overconfident friend. They say things with a lot of confidence. And, as a human being, you don't always question that confidence. I mean, if you remember, like, I don't know, when you were in school or something, if you had a friend who always said, like, who sprouted facts, with confidence, 90% of the time, like, he must be right. He must, I don't know the answer, so he must be right. I think that's the approach here. Also, to your example of the Mac Mini, I've done that with clothes. So, like, I was talking to ChatGPT. I'm like, hey, I have some of these outfits, and what type of shoes or what color of shoes should I buy? And these are my requirements in terms of comfort and other things. And it started, throwing at me, these shoe ideas. And it would literally say, it's like, these are the shoes that all the Bay Area tech executives wear these days. And then you're like, oh my God, I want to know that, right? Or all the cool people in the Bay Area, because it knows where you live, it knows like the type of people you talk to, because you're talking to it about them, you know. And it will keep on giving you like interesting. So it gave me like it was common projects, low heel or Achilles shoes, and they retail for like $500, $600. And it could also give me a much cheaper example, but it did not. So you're right. I didn't end up buying them because I didn't think they will be as comfortable as I wanted. But I did get influenced by the color choice and the style, and I bought like a $200 Kohans.
So are
Um,
you
but
more likely to buy something that your AI recommends or that your friends recommend?
I mean, today I think I think AI is probably influencing me more than my friends are.
Yeah.
Because when you think about my friends are not all like me. They're not all, styling themselves, or, you know, their preferences are not the same as mine, whether that's in clothing, whether that's in food or other things.
Right.
Versus with AI, I could tell it my preferences. So, we're going to take a spring break trip next week to France, to Paris, and I'm talking to Gemini. I'm like, okay, here's my food preferences. Here's what my kids like. Now tell me, and I want to go to like the most popular places. So now take all of that combination and give me restaurant recommendations. And these are the places I'm visiting around it. So it has to be geographically close. And the recommendation it spits out, you don't know if they're the best places or not. And in some cases, you may do a more research on Yelp or other things. Similarly, like, if I looked at, those common project shoes, I would go on a Nordstrom and I'll look at customer reviews and whatnot, or Reddit. But in other places, you'll be like, hey, I don't need to do more effort. This is good enough for me. And this is actually a lot more personalized for me
Hmm.
than a friend of mine telling me, because with a friend the depth of the relationship varies, right?
Yeah.
If you know me for a long time, then you may be giving me a good recommendation. But if you don't know me for long enough, you may not be giving me as good and relevant a recommendation. So I think AI is definitely something that's influencing me, and as I'm seeing others as well today.
Yeah. I think that's so. First of all, I never imagined you as a shoe dog. So this is like totally, you're blowing my
I'm
mind
like an
here.
aspirational one. I don't have that many shoes, partially because I don't have that much space, or that my wife would let me buy too many. But I feel like there's some aspirational element to that. Like I would like to have some
So
nice shoes.
you're going to Paris. I'll give you a warning. I went to Paris with my wife last year, and she insisted that I go shopping with her. And we went to that very famous street, and we bought
Yeah.
Italian shoes in France. And I can tell you, she made me buy 2 pairs of shoes, not just 1, because you're there, you might as well buy 2. And I gotta tell you, those shoes have tried to kill me at least 3 times. I mean, they're you just be very, very careful when you're shopping for shoes in France, because I it's very dangerous wearing those shoes. I wore 'em on last Friday to the
Yeah.
city, and I had to switch to my sneakers at one point.
Yeah.
It's not good.
Yeah,
So
that's
you
my worry with nice shoes too. It's like, you get so used to comfort that, nice things are not always comfortable.
exactly. I'm wearing Birkenstocks right now. They're the
Yeah.
ugliest shoe in the face of the earth. So, yeah, it's fascinating. You're saying to me what I experienced, which is that um, you know, properly prompted, you know, AI can be an honest broker. The question is, when I see things like, Anthropic refuses to do business with the Pentagon. And then 3 seconds later, OpenAI is in there. Oh, by the way, we have a contract for you. Um, the the blowback in the market of that it has been really interesting to watch as Claude has exploded over the last several
Yep.
weeks. Uh, Not only because of that, but it's a great product.
Hmm.
You wonder, is that company that you got a recommendation for those $500 shoes? Are they somehow influencing ChatGPT? Or and what's the danger of that? If you could figure out,
Hmm.
and I know they're thinking about taking advertising. So if I'm taking advertising from, I'll make it up, Ferragamo. I'm taking money from
Yeah.
Ferragamo, and Usman's looking for a pair of shoes. Am I going to tell him to buy Ferragamos? I mean, even though I know that Usman's definitely not a Ferragamo guy, he's more of a
Yeah.
Birkenstock guy.
Yeah.
Um, how do you think about
I,
that?
I think some of it is happening today without advertising. So, I've had the privilege of working with a really smart SEO guy since my Sears days. I hired him there, and I worked with him across, there and Albertsons. He was one of the very early adopters when it came to, AEO and GEO.
Mhm.
And he was, one of those people. The moment it came out, he was one very scared, but at the same time very excited that I'm kind of bored of SEO. I've been doing this for 25 years, and I've been at the top of my game for that. So now I have something new and exciting to play with. Um, so from a organic perspective, there has been a lot of work that people who understand it or who have worked on understanding it have figured it out.
Yeah.
And they're showing up. They're showing up like, everywhere, very prevalent across these answers. Um, because AI, as Gen AI, as we know, is not producing, a completely novel and new information. What it's producing is a synthesis of existing information. It may be giving you, the words or the output in a new way, but it is completely influenced by existing information, right? So people who have figured it out and they have revamped their websites and their digital properties and have added all of the right whether it's reviews, whether that's product descriptions or AI answers, those long form answers, that has become a very powerful tool where people are showing up in these answers because AI is indexing, AI is searching, and it's not looking for keywords, it's looking for those answers to those questions. So that's
Right.
happening already. So, whether this was Common Project or Nordstrom, somebody did a great job there for, when you think about the connectivity, right? Bay Area tech executives, cool shoes and whatever color, all of that, AI was able to figure out to say, hey, these are the exact shoes you want because these are what everybody wears, the type of
Right.
person you may be aspiring to, um, based on what it thinks of you. And I think that's a pretty interesting thing that it didn't come up with it on its own. This is something that existing pieces in a blog or a retailer or the company CPG itself,
Mhm.
the manufacturer doing a great job on their digital properties of having the right content, whether that's a blog or a long form description. That's really what's driving it today. And you're right. The advertisement piece is scary. Part of like the marketer in me is excited to see that because I think what is it like? ChatGPT had like 800 million active users. So being able to reach 800 million active users is pretty exciting. Being coming out of like this megaphone, your product or your recommendation coming out of this megaphone that people very much believe in from a marketer perspective is very interesting. But I think from a customer perspective and also from a business professional perspective, I think that it needs to be figured out. It hasn't been figured out yet, and it's going to be an interesting thing. Um, but I do think that the initial impact will be pretty strong because there is a certain level of confidence that the a search Google search result would be a listing, but if you think about it from a customer response or a customer behavior perspective, the top of the list is something that you know you click first or you think
Right.
about first because
Right. Right.
you don't think about that they've paid the most amount of money. You see them at the top. So you don't go to the second page or the third page and even the bottom of the page, you're looking at the first few at the top, right? The same thing will apply here where, when AI gives you the recommendation, you are going to, as a consumer, look at, those top recommendations. And then AI comes with a lot more confidence. Google is saying, make your choice with, all these options. AI is saying, here's your one choice that I
Yeah.
recommend, and I know you, and all that, and says, you're brilliant, and this and
You're so
that.
smart. You would buy this. You would buy these shoes,
Yeah,
Usman, because you are
yeah.
so
And
you're
it
such
said,
a
here's my
handsome tech
honest
expert.
opinion. Here's one thing. It's just the between the language and what you perceive as what it knows about you. I think that level of confidence and recommendations are going to be much higher, and that's going to be an interesting thing. I think at least initially you will see very high return from a marketer perspective. But I think what will be interesting to see is how it normalizes once, if marketers don't do it right and they actually don't put the right products there, or if the AI doesn't get it right, the underlying recommendation has to be more than who's paying the most amount of money. Actually has to take the personalization and the context into account.
Yeah. So I think about my journey. So when I was thinking about building my own AI system, I started the conversation with Claude and said, because you've seen all this open claw stuff, and you see these
Yeah.
3-minute videos of like, even an idiot like you could build this, Ron. And I'm like, okay, uh, what's this mean? So I started chatting with Claude and saying, given what I do about my business and how I would like to, kind of expand it, but the limiting factor is I can't tell you things, right? I can't give you data from my customers.
Hmm.
So I'm having these kind of very obtuse conversations, like, hiding things from my girlfriend kind of thing. And how would that work? And, Claude's like, well, you could build your own system. And I was like, well, really, how would I do that? And he wrote this really detailed specification of how I could do it. And I said, well, what's all the software cost? And he's like, well, it's free. It's all open source. Right.
Yep.
I said, well, no, well, what about all the, the connectors that my customers would have to have? That's free too. And this is how it works. Well, how it literally walked me through everything I would have to do to do this. It gave me links to people online that have done it, and all this stuff.
Yep.
And I said, well, then what should I buy? Well, now this thing owns me. I mean, if it would have told me to go buy a Bentley, I would have gone and bought the Bentley. It's like, okay, well, that's
Yeah.
what I'm supposed to buy, right? The
Yeah.
credibility is so high,
Hmm.
right? It's unlike Google, where the top search. And by the way, I don't think I've ever been to the second page on Google. I don't know what
Yeah.
it looks like. I'll have
Nobody
to do
does.
that someday
Yeah.
just to see what it looks like. But you see the top thing, you click on the top thing, because
Hmm.
we're creatures of habit, and if it's first, it must be right. And before I'm done with this process, I've spent $10,000, and I have no idea if I can even. This might be the world's biggest, most expensive paperweight that I've ever, that you could ever buy. I'm sure I'll figure it out. If I can't figure it out, I'll call you. But um, the power of this tool is just immense,
Yeah.
in the ethical. And by the way, I don't think Apple's paying Anthropic a nickel to do
Yeah.
that. I think that
Yeah.
legitimately is. I think that was probably really good research, right?
Yep.
And it showed me all of the models, and Llama's good at this, and the next one's good at that,
Hmm.
and these are the Chinese models, and these are. And I asked the question. It's like, well, what if I put a Chinese model in there? Are they going to know everything about it? It's like, no, it actually doesn't work that way. It's secured on
Local.
your
Yeah.
system. It's
Yep.
local. That is the superpower, is that nobody's going to know what's in your
Yeah.
system, which is really, to me, really fascinating. And you think about, I have an iPhone 13, which I feel like Fred Flintstone with this thing, but I keep putting it off because I know that these local small models are going to,
Yeah.
we're literally weeks or months away from that happening. I'm hoping the next iteration of the iPhone will have that, that
Hmm.
local, very secure system, and they would be the people
Yeah.
that could do it. Let me ask you about something else. You know, um, I want to talk to you about leadership. I want to talk about purpose. You've described yourself as a student of leadership, in some of the things that you've written over the years, and we've talked about. Um, what do you see as the biggest problem in corporate leadership today? We're all talking about business, but I don't want to get into politics too much today. But on the corporate side, what do you walked away from Albertsons and said, hey, I need to think about what I'm going to do with my life. Um,
Hmm.
how are you thinking about the type of leader you want to work with, the type of leader you want to be? What's the world need?
Yeah. I think, the biggest gripe I have with, corporate leadership is too many leaders think of people who work for them as commodities, I feel almost.
Yeah. Oh, and
And I think,
we're seeing an acceleration of that.
correct,
Yeah.
correct. And I think the larger you go, up the corporate ladder and the larger teams you have, I think it some of it happened naturally because you just have too many people reporting into you, so you can't know them as much. But and you're too busy with work and other things. Um, but I think that's the biggest dilemma I have, and I don't always have a good answer for it for other people. But I think I'm a big proponent, and I this is my own personal experience had been that I have succeeded and I have learned and I have become a better person, professional, and a leader when another leader like yourself invested their time in me. Um, and that type of personal relationship did not happen because the two of us were just one to one, meaning I was your only direct report, right? Or in some cases, I was not even a direct report to somebody, but those leaders made me feel that it was a one to one relationship. And I learned the most, both directly and indirectly. Indirectly, in terms of like the way they dealt with, the way you interacted with people above you, like board of directors, your colleagues and your direct reports. So without even you telling me anything, I'm learning from you because I'm just there. I'm in the room, right? And
Right.
then when we are talking and I say something and you're like, hey, you should be thinking about it this way or that way. That effort, because you could just be like, okay, good enough, or you could be like, no, you're wrong. Let's go figure it out. Versus giving that direction to some extent. You don't need to be a micromanager or be very specified in your directions, but giving those, nudges towards the right direction, I think has been really helpful. And then on top of that, giving that empowerment and that accountability. So, hey, you have the empowerment to try things. And if you fail, you learn from it. You have the freedom to fail. It's not going to be like, oh, that was him and not, nothing to do with me, right? So I think
Mhm.
those have been places where I learned the most, and you weren't an easy boss. And I don't think any boss that I've had or any leader that I look up to was ever an easy leader. They were very hard. They made me work hard. They made me think hard. But I think what really worked for me was, what I was learning from them. And that's why, like, when you go back to, like, we talk about Eddie Lampert a lot because just we spent so much time with him, you know, um, just learning from him, there was an incredible amount of learning there, that he took in terms of how he thought about things, how he moved, fast on things. There were some things from a retail future perspective and, analytics and data and loyalty that he was, ahead of his time. But I think, and the same thing, like when, the most intimate time you and I spent together was during the year we were together at Artway. And I think, we were really trying to build a very, futuristic omni-channel, furniture retailer. We weren't successful to the extent we would have liked to be. But I think, um, it was just a great time to learn and be very in a place where you know um it was a corporate environment, but it was a very also like a personal environment where you were free to experiment with things. You were free to try different things, knowing that your leadership had your back. And if you failed, the question was not what went wrong, the question was what did you learn from it. And kind of going from there. So at Albertsons, I had a 6-person team. So it was very easy to kind of like know everybody. And then at the peak of it, I had like 60 plus people. And it would have been, and some I hired, some I inherited because teams consolidated and whatnot. And it was not the, easiest thing to know people and talk to them. But one thing that I did was I just wanted to make sure that I was approachable, I was there, and I talked to people because I knew on the other side how I felt when that, you did that with me or somebody else did. Um, so I would make sure I was like walking around the office. My office was in the smack middle of the team, just having conversation with, especially I would seek out the quieter ones who would usually like, the operations folks, the UX designers, some of the engineers were just like punching up, on these screens, and don't really want to be disturbed at times. And I would just go and talk to them, and I'll talk to them about family and hobbies, and be very open about, my family, my hobbies, and, different things. Had certain level of vulnerability to show, I had a health scare. Let's talk about that, and what I'm doing, when I started on my weight loss journey, what caused it, and what am I doing, and how scared I am or excited I am. I think those things were, you know, uh, those things I think go a long way. You will never be like best friends with everybody, but showing as a leader that you have an interest in their personal, likes and dislikes and their lives, I think goes a long way. People really get motivated by it. And I don't
Yeah.
know if you remember this, but when you gave me the job offer at Artwin, there was a component in the offer which was, essentially a monetary amount for daycare for my
I
daughter. She
remember
was
that.
2 years old at that time, and
Yeah.
if you think about it, like it doesn't like it was it could have been you could have called it anything, but the fact that that was what it's called, my wife still remembers that about you. You know,
Yeah.
and she thinks it was a very special thing you did, and the mad person in me is not like, it's a package is a package, like it's just whatever the package was the package, but
Well, you're
that's
such
the
a
way
you're
it
such
was
a cynic.
packaged. But it makes a
Wow.
difference how you present it and how you talk about it. So I
Yeah.
think that's the thing, like how we spend our time, how we treat people. I think it's very important.
Yeah, I do remember that. Now you reminded me of it, but I remember when we talked, you were talking about your daughter and your wife being, concerned about being, moving and this
Yep.
stuff and the expensive daycare. And I said, well, why don't we just do that? And
Yeah.
you're right. It could have been X number of dollars for anything. It just here's some
Yeah.
dollars.
Yeah.
Um, one of the I talk about Doug McMillon a lot. He's just retired from Walmart, and I knew Doug when he was a buyer, and I was a Cub salesman. And I tell leaders all the time, or unfortunately, he's not on LinkedIn anymore. You want to see how a CEO should behave, follow him, because you never
Yeah.
see a picture where he talks about himself. Never,
Yeah.
never, never. And you watch these tech bros in San Francisco, and everything's about themselves. It's all they talk about,
Yeah.
and probably their shoes. So maybe you'll have that in common when you get your shoes set up right. But you know, every LinkedIn video from Doug was him in a store, or him in a warehouse, talking to an associate or giving an award. Except once a quarter, sitting in his office, leaning on his desk, talking about how those associates delivered the numbers, right? And there's just not much of that out there. There's a lot of this, look how big my yacht is, and I bought the city of Venice to have my wedding, and those are the things that really concern me. God
Yeah.
help America. Those are the things that help me, that concern me when I think about what I'm doing. I'm trying to change that arc a little bit. So I want to talk one last topic. You started to touch on it. You look amazing, and you've been on. I remember you as that stressed out guy sitting at the end of the table with the soda and the chips and the trying to make it through another 14-hour day and convince Eddie
Energy
to
drinks. That was my thing.
yeah, yeah, convince Eddie to change the price on a washing machine 3 cents so we could make more money. But tell me about your journey.
Yeah, so I think you were the one who said this, like, over your lifetime you've maybe lost like 500 pounds and gained like
Yeah, I
another
definitely said that.
500, right?
I've at
Yeah.
least lost 500 pounds.
Yeah. So I think I don't know if I'm there, but I'm definitely around probably 300 on that. So I think the first time I did it in a major way was during when I was going to get married 15 years ago, and I lost like 110 pounds. And then, many, many years later, it was actually from Sears to Art Van when I was on this keto diet and was on a weight loss journey. And actually, when I showed up to Art Van, you were like, hey, I think I hired a lot more of you than what has showed up. And I had lost, I think, like 50, 60 pounds at that time. So, this is a third major attempt. And I'm hoping it feels like it's more substantial and, hopefully long term this time. But one, I turned 40 last year, so I started feeling old. In your 20s and 30s, you
Oh,
feel pretty
just wait. You're not
indestructible.
feeling old yet. Just wait. You're not feeling old yet.
I know, I'm sure, but that's what I'm scared of, right? So, I'm like, I gotta think about things. And I went to my doctor and I did my physical, and my glucose was high, my cholesterol was high, and he was like, hey, you got to lose weight, you got to start moving, because all of these things put you at a risk from a heart perspective and this and that, all these diseases. And as you get older, you think about the future, in terms of like how much longer you want to be there for your kids, and you're right, like work adds stress, so you're like, hey, if I was in better health, I can manage the stress better, and all that. So that was kind of a motivator for me to really start thinking about it. um I had done, I tried GLP-1s before, about I think 4 or 5 years ago, when Wegovy and Ozempic were kind of like first starting to come out. And I was doing the lazy way, where I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna take the GLP-1 and that will help me lose weight. And then the nausea was too much, and I kind of like just got scared and stopped. So when I talked to my doctor, I'm like, I want to figure this out in the right way. Like, how do we go about it? And then,
Yeah.
so I've been on this 3-step regimen, or I guess four. So I started really controlling my diet, because I wanted to bring the glucose to a very manageable level. And then I got into walking. So my average step count used to be like, on a good day, like 5,000 steps. I now make a deliberate effort to actually stand and move. So this is probably the longest I have sat, maybe in like the last 8 months. So I'm typically like moving a lot more. So much so that I was complaining to somebody that I go to watch a movie, I don't actually enjoy the experience. I like movies, I don't like the experience because I'm sitting for too long. So I actually get up in the middle of the movie, go on the side to the stairs, and just kind of stretch myself.
Yeah.
Because I'm still getting used to, and it was deliberate first, but now it's becoming natural to me to move and stand and walk around. So I'm doing like 15,000 steps a day. And if I don't do that, I actually feel it like, it's like a personal failure that today I did not
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
So that has been really good, very sustained and constant, in terms of what I've been doing. So that's one. The second is I hired a personal trainer, because I felt that I can buy a gym membership, but I'm not very accountable when it comes to my personal health. So it will be, your Mac Mini example. I have a Peloton that's basically, a coat hanger or like a towel hanger, right? And I've had it for years. Um, so I wanted it to be more committed, more formal. So I had a personal trainer. I'm doing 4 times a week, strength training. And it's interesting to see like how much more I can do now. I actually posted a video because I felt so good about myself, of doing chin-ups on Instagram. I don't post that much on Instagram, but I felt really good. So I had like this soundtrack of feeling good, and
Great. That's awesome.
yeah. So I'm doing like chin-ups, and I felt pretty good about myself. And then, I did start taking another GLP-1, but making sure that I'm not overly reliant on that, and I'm making more sustainable changes. So all of those things kind of combined have been really helpful in getting me to a better health. I think I'm at a weight where I was in my high school. I am
Yeah.
very close to hitting 200 pounds, which is very interesting. I'm about 90 something pounds down since I started.
Yeah.
Um, feel really good. The amount of energy I have, sometimes I don't know what to do with it. Like it's weird having that much energy,
When you think
and
about it, you used to, so I've lost about 100 pounds, and like going to buy 2 50-pound bags of dog food, and you pick up one, you're like, oh my, I used to have twice this much, and you
I know,
carry that
I
around
know.
all day. That, I tell the people that I coach, and I've been, as you know, I've been on my journey for about 3 or 4 years now, that, the movement, the steps is the most important thing. Moving your body.
Yeah,
We as creatures, we're designed to get up in the morning when the sun rises, walk very long distances,
yeah,
very short bursts of exertion while we, kill an antelope and then carry the antelope back. That's how you're designed, right? So
yeah,
you're not
yeah,
designed to sit on a podcast for 2 hours. You're designed to walk long distances. And when I was on the board of the MS Society for about 15 years or so, and during that period, the society kind of evolved quite a bit. And if you go to the website even today, the logo is about movement, right?
yeah,
And the magic number for someone, we used to say back then, I'm sure that it's evolved. I haven't been on the board for 5 or 6 years, but was was it was 3,000. You had to get up and do 3,000 steps, and if you're doing 7,000, you're going to be in good shape.
yep,
And it's not about the count. Um, it's about the emotional impact, right?
yep,
And you
yep,
say you feel bad because you're not doing 15,000. You used to feel bad because you did 15,000, right? I
yep,
remember when I first started to really get serious. Every morning I get up around 6 o'clock, 6:30, anytime in that window, and I'll grab the dogs. And I'm very fortunate. I'm a member of a club, and we have about 800 acres, and I walk the dogs for about an hour. Well, the beginning
yep,
of my walk goes up this hill for about 100 yards, but it's not a steep grade. And when I first started to walk, I would go about 30 yards and I had to stop and rest.
yep,
Right. I'm sure you know what that feels like. But once you start doing that, all sorts of good things happen. In my in my leadership, in my coaching and in my leadership practice, I tell people people hire me because they have some kind of crisis and they think they want to get promoted, and the need is to understand how to get ahead. But the real need is to be emotionally healthy.
yep,
The real need is to get your head straight, and that comes from kind of controlling your morning and doing exactly what you're doing, which is just stand up and do something. And once you start doing that, everything else starts to get really easy. So congratulations. I don't think you'll ever catch me because I don't think you're going to put another 100 on to take it off, but I'll still
yeah.
be the champion at around 500 pounds.
Yeah.
Uh,
I gotta say, you look great. You look great. So,
yeah,
if I could look
yeah,
like you at your age, I think it will be good. It will be.
yeah,
I would be
exactly.
in a good place.
Yeah. Well, I certainly feel a lot better than I've felt in many, many years. And it's as much emotional as it is physical. And you know that, right?
Yep, yep,
Once you start to
exactly.
get to that place, everything becomes additive.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's really been a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you so much for the time, and thank you for everything you've done for me over the years. It's been a pleasure experiencing little chunks of life with you, and I'm glad you're thinking about the next phase of the journey. I'm excited to see where you're going to end up. Wherever it is, you're going to make a huge impact again. So thank you.
Same here. Thank you for having me, and thanks for all the time you've spent. I've learned a lot, and I look forward to many, many more years of learning from you.
Yeah. Be well.
You too.